Hey there, hope you're doing really, really good. And welcome to this episode where we're going to talk about a bunch of things, actually. We have Jerome, who literally just like an hour ago emailed me. I think that was actually a good place to start. Sounds like Jerome has pretty classic insomnia. We can learn a lot from talking about that. There's going to be a rebuttal here. Somebody thought something I said the other day was blasphemy when I said that. You know, when I talked about how sleep maybe doesn't have that much impact on physical performance. We're gonna see Maria had a question about like watching TV in bed. Lita had a question about like if withdrawal from antidepressant could trigger insomnia, as well as how to decrease hyperarousal and a few other things as well. I think a lot of good material to learn and talk about here. So before we get going here, as always, nothing is medical advice to anyone, just general thoughts and general thoughts and advice that I hope will be helpful to the person that wrote the comment or email, or anybody else with a similar situation. So that said, let us move on to, I think actually this is the best place to start here with that email from Jerome. So this came, it was literally 54 minutes ago, and I will put on my glasses here and read this. Hi, I hope you're doing great. I've been listening to your podcast and I thought I'd send you an email to get some advice, but first let me tell you my story. My name is Jerome. I'm 29 years old and I live in the Philippines. My insomnia started back in May. I was going through a huge amount of stress at work, was suffering from health anxiety, had panic attacks, and then one night I started experiencing this hypnic jerk like every single time I tried falling asleep. My body would jolt me awake, which freaked me out, and I did not sleep that night. I worried so badly about sleeping, which I believed had started this nightmarish problem. It was terrible in the first few months. I would have many sleepless nights every week. I would say it got so much better in June. I almost had no sleepless night. It came back in July, but not as terrible as it used to be. Now I would only have about 1-2 sleepless nights every other week. The book Sleep Effortlessly or The Effortless Sleep Method by Sasha Stevens is what helped me improve my sleep. It has changed the way I think about sleep, but I don't feel like it totally cured me because I would still have bad nights, and those bad nights, sleepless nights, drastically influence my sleep confidence, sleep anxiety. Really hope you can give me some advice. As I know you're quite an expert on this, please, are you able to relate? Number one, are you able to relate to my story in any way? Not sure if you have ever gone through insomnia before. Number two, I'm pretty convinced that insomnia is psychological in nature. In fact, before I read all these questions, let's go over them one by one. And before I do, just going through the story here, it is very, very, very typical. So we have someone, I don't know if this applies to you, Jerome, but if you have somebody that's maybe have a little bit of tendency to worry, or somebody that's maybe really health feels that their health is really important to them, somebody who's a little bit type A, like really structured and organized, or somebody who's a little bit of an overthinker, those type of things like make you have a little bit of a predisposition, a little bit higher risk of developing insomnia. But many people have these predispositions and sleep fantastic, so it's not a problem. But then something happens. I was going through a huge amount of stress at work. There is a trigger here, a precipitating event, something that triggers sleepless nights. And the thing here is that the initial sleepless nights is normal too. If somebody had a huge amount of stress at work, but then went home and enjoyed a great meal and went to sleep and slept great, that would be like, that's a little odd. When we have a lot of stress, it is normal to our appetite maybe is not there. We don't sleep as well. We are a little bit, on edge. And that's because there is a stress, and we're supposed to react to that to solve this problem, right? And that's why we are looking for solutions. We're a little bit on edge like that. That's normal. That's a normal reaction. But what happens next is the reaction to the sleepless nights when we start identifying insomnia as a problem and we try to fix it. We try to that doesn't work. We try this other thing, or we really have a problem, etc. That's how insomnia really evolves. So a lot of this can be applied to somebody with your story here, Jerome. Now, it gets so much better in June. That's fantastic. And That's one thing that can always be used to boost your sleep confidence. Things have gotten better in the past, they will get better again. Just as on the flip side of that, what I learned from by the way, there's a great podcast out there called Insomnia Coach by my good friend Martin Reed. And the last episode was a discussion with him and a psychologist named Nick Wignall. Really great discussion. One thing I really took away from that episode was how Nick said, for a lot of people, insomnia is almost like PTSD. It's like you're worried about the big one, that initial one, the initial 4 completely sleepless nights or whatever it was, and you're afraid that's going to come back again. And all, everything we do really is aimed to kind of build sleep confidence, so you're not worried about the big one coming back again. But where I'm going here is to say you can use kind of the same reverse PTSD, meaning you can look at the fact that you got better in June and let that boost your sleep confidence again. Like if things have gotten better in the past, they will and can get better again. Just a little comment there. Sasha Stevens' book is amazing. And now let's get to these 5 questions. Are you able to relate to my story in any way? Not sure if you have ever gone through insomnia before. I've never had chronic insomnia. I think I've had what many people, maybe I have more than most people, I'm not sure, but in a month, I would say that I definitely have a stretch of maybe I have like 4 or 5 nights where I really don't sleep much at all, and it's almost always related to actually more of a positive excitement or something I'm really thinking about, but it still is not nice. I mean, still, even though I know like I'm excited about something, that doesn't necessarily help. And I try to stick to my own advice, like get out of bed. And my wife, she'll tell me she knows if I haven't been able to sleep because the clock in our kitchen is like down, because what I do is like I don't look at it. I take the clock, leave it upside down, so I don't know what time it is. But I've never had like chronic insomnia. It's been like 3 nights or something like that, and it typically resets. Number 2, but that said, your story is classic. Everything about it is classic. The hypnic jerks, sign of hyperarousal, the stress, the reaction to it, all of that. And so that's important to know, that it's very, very typical, and that should give you that confidence that what helps others, meaning kind of the techniques I talk about here, will help you as well. Number 2, I'm pretty convinced that insomnia is psychological in nature. I keep having this bad thought that I have a broken switch in my brain. Can you comment on that? Classic. That is one of the most common things that somehow that switch in my brain is broken, and that cannot happen. You cannot lose the ability to sleep. You cannot damage yourself by not sleeping well. And I think one analogy that I learned from Martin Reed, actually, that I think is a good one, is, and just illustrates how we cannot harm ourselves, is you can hold your breath, for a really long time. And, and that, you can hold it for a period of time that's much longer than normal. If you take like 14 breaths in a normal minute, well, you can hold your breath for a full 2 minutes, but no longer. Like eventually you have to breathe again. That's just how physiology works. That's just how it is. Same thing with sleep. Again, you can go without sleep for a long time, but sleep comes back, and you cannot, like, just how you cannot hold your breath to a point where you harm your body, you cannot go without sleep to a point where you hurt your brain or hurt your body. Like it regulates itself. So very, very common concern, and know that that cannot happen. You cannot lose the ability to sleep. Sleep is supposed to be very easy. Why is it so hard now? That's a really, really good question. Before you had trouble sleeping, Jerome, or anybody else that doesn't have any trouble sleeping, the reason it's easy for them is that there's absolutely no effort. If you ask a person that has no trouble sleeping, like, what do you do to sleep? They'll just be dumbfounded. They'll just be like, I don't know, I don't do anything. And so they don't question it at all. Also, their confidence is like 100%, because they may have had trouble sleeping, but they never reacted to it. It just went away by itself. So their sleep confidence is like 100%. They're like, they know that they're going to sleep. They expect to sleep. So there's really no friction at all. And that's why it is easy to sleep for people that don't have any trouble sleeping. Now, why is it so hard now? Well, it is more than one thing, but it is mainly because of the kind of attention and hyperarousal around sleep. Meaning, once you've had a really bad stretch of not sleeping well, then you have that PTSD type effect. Like, it is a scary prospect of having that again. So you're always aware that I may have that, I may have another really bad stretch of insomnia. That's kind of like you're a little bit hyper aroused, and that hyper arousal then kind of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You don't sleep well, and then you're inclined to try to solve the problem, and you try things, and that becomes an effort, and then that doesn't help, so that it further increases the hyperarousal, and it seems really, really difficult. And another thing is, like, this whole process is so tiring, and you feel hopeless. And basically all of it goes into, like, why is it so hard now? It is basically just because you're trying so hard and you're so worried about it. I think that's the easiest way to explain it. And the tricky thing here is that the key is to make it effortless again, to do less things. Don't try to do anything to sleep. Don't try any gadgets or products. Don't change your bedroom. Don't try to figure out why you have trouble sleeping. Basically just peel everything off, just reverse the whole process. And that is the key to it becoming effortless again. And, I always try to stay out positive and optimistic here. And I want to say that every single person that has kind of committed to doing things that I talk about here, like the CBTI techniques or effortless sleep method, or any other like solid method like that, does better and gets to a point where they either sleep great and completely forget about that's maybe not true, but like the insomnia becomes a remote part of history that you don't even worry about. And some people get to a point where they're like, I sleep pretty good, not necessarily great, but I'm not worried about sleep. And I think how well you do really depends on where you came from. If you, before May, in your case, or somebody else, like before you started having trouble sleeping, if you before that pretty much slept good, there's absolutely no reason why you shouldn't be able to sleep good again. Absolutely not. You should expect that. You should expect to get there. You should not have any expectations at all on the night to night. What happens tonight, nobody knows. That's the same for every single human being. We don't know that. But you should totally expect to get better if you just gotta stick with the effortless sleep method or CBTI or any other good program like that. And now, if on the other hand, you are a person who are like, I never ever slept good in my whole life. Since a childhood, I never really slept well. Now it's really bad. Well, then you should expect to at least get back to your baseline, where you're like, you didn't sleep great, but it wasn't a problem for you. So that's absolutely something to expect. Number 4, do you have any tips on shutting your mind off? My mind off. Well, here's the thing with that. It's impossible. Nobody, not a single human being, can control their thoughts or their emotions. Therefore, any attempt at shutting your mind off will backfire, because you will try something, then you will monitor if it works, and then it didn't work, then you feel like that didn't work, then you try something else. So the trick here becomes, you cannot shut it off, so you can't try to shut it off. So it becomes a question of, or a game of distraction. You can't, I made an episode called like something about like you have a remote control. You can't change the broadcast, like you can't change what's going on in your mind, but you can try to switch the channel. You can try to direct your mind in a different way. And I think what I talk about a lot lately, because I think it's become a really big realization for me, is that time before you go to bed, that time between, let's say, 9:30 and 11:30 p.m. or whatever time it is, has to be fun, something you enjoy, something you look forward to. If you enjoy watching a Netflix show, which I talk a lot about lately, that's why I'm laughing. If you enjoy like a Netflix show, fantastic. You want to watch a movie, great. If you want to go out and hang out with your friends, perfect. Whatever you want to do before you go to bed, make it something enjoyable that just takes your mind off of sleeping. if you're in bed, and then I think somebody's going to ask about this later, and I can kind of answer it now already. It's fine to watch TV in bed. It's fine to watch Netflix in bed. It's totally fine, at least as long as you enjoy it. As long as you enjoy it, and it keeps your mind off of sleep. And if and when you wake up at night and you feel like, I'm not going to sleep, there's a couple of things you can do. If you feel pretty comfortable in bed, then just stay and you just try to think of something nice, and then you'll go back to sleep again. But if you're frustrated, same thing. Like, try to do something that takes your mind off of sleep, and you can't shut your mind off, but you can direct it in a different way. Is there any food, number 5, is there any food I need to avoid? I literally stopped eating sugary things and fatty things because of this. So here we go again. It is the fact that you're trying to do things to sleep more is the problem. The attempt at solving the insomnia is the problem, because many things are happening here. First of all, you're thinking of ways to produce sleep, thinking of ways to sleep better, which means you're giving the insomnia attention, and insomnia loves attention. The more you think about it, the more powerful it gets, the more of your life it tries to invade and infiltrate, right? And secondly, you're trying things. You're like, I'm trying to stop sugary things. I wonder if that's going to help. I did have a little candy. It's ruined. But wait a minute, it was actually sugar-free, so I think it's fine. You see how all that just, again, brings attention, it blows the problem up. So no, there's no food to avoid, but rather the whole process of thinking about what food to avoid is the problem, right? Sleep is simple. We unfortunately, everything we hear out there just makes it sound really complicated. Like, there's you should do this, you should do that, you should do this. No, you should shift your attention completely away from sleep. When you have trouble sleeping, you should spend less time in bed, and basically, those are the key things to getting better. And then once you've started this path, okay, I'm going to spend less time in bed, and I'm going to shift my attention away from sleep, then just keep going. If you have a sleepless night, try not to react to it. Don't change anything. Just keep moving forward. Treat it like a hiccup, and then you'll find I'm sleeping better. Builds your sleep confidence. You're falling back to sleep faster. Great. And then a couple of weeks, couple of months later, you're like, that's it. I'm sleeping well again. Perfect. Jerome, I hope this helped. And one of the first people that interacted with me on the channel is Mark, who was also from the Philippines. He started having trouble sleeping after a trip to Canada. And my wife is from the Philippines as well, so a couple of connections there. I hope this helps. All right. Now, that said, let us move on to, actually, let's go to this one. Maria sent an email 9 hours ago, and it's going to be a quick one, but I'd like to read it. I listened to your podcast about watching a Netflix show. I worry a lot about sleep, like the lady in your podcast. Once my family is going to sleep, I stress that it's getting later and later, and I struggle. My eyes are getting watery. I yawn, but I can't seem to sleep. All this worry causes me not to be sleepy. I was told to stay away from TV and read a book. I've been struggling for the past 3 months. When nighttime comes, I get anxiety. Can I still be in my bed watching TV? Yes. In my opinion, it is absolutely no problem watching TV in bed. Listen, what do most people do? Most people that don't have any trouble sleeping, guess what they do? They watch TV in bed. Or they're on the computer and watching a Netflix show, which is what I do right up until I go to bed. Or I am in bed, rather. And right before I sleep, I watch a Netflix show. And so a couple of things here. The light that we always hear about, not a problem at all. There's no evidence to that. The problem is when you're trying to do things to produce sleep, like I'm going to stay off the TV screen, I'm going to read a book, I'm going to try to relax, that just increases anxiety. So I want to say, kind of like that to that lady in the podcast, and I would have just said to Jerome, that time before you go to bed has to be something that's fun, that you look forward to, and that takes your mind off of sleep. So, and it's I find that I'm thinking more and more lately about how terrible it is that when people have trouble sleeping, we tell them, meaning we, like as in like on YouTube, on TV and stuff like that, all you hear about is what am I saying? On TV. I mean, online and from friends, all of that. All we hear about is like how you should do all these sleep hygiene things, which just make things worse. Okay. That said, let us move to. Okay, let's do this one, which I've been really looking forward to. Brendan, a huge supporter of the Insomnia Insight channel, wrote this one day ago. Here we go. Lack of sleep doesn't impact performance? ? No studies? ? Come on. There are plenty of studies linking performance decrease and sleep deprivation. Do you seriously think a player on a team kept awake for 2 days before a game would not lose something on the performance? So a couple of things here. First of all, absolutely. I think if somebody was like 48-hour sleep deprivation, they wouldn't play as well. That said, what I replied to Brendan here actually was that what I want to point out is that there's no linear perfect relationship. Meaning, it's not like you can say, if you for every hour you sleep, you're definitely going to run this much faster. There's no such perfect relationship. And in the episode that Brendan talks about, what I wanted to point out was that if you are an athlete and you have trouble sleeping nights before an event, then it's not going to help you to think that you have to get a lot of sleep to perform well. Actually, that's going to lead to worse performance, like worse sleep and maybe worse performance. So it becomes a mind game here. But I think that's the important thing actually is to prove to yourself that everything doesn't hinge upon sleep. And the way to do that, I brought that up in this example, was you can monitor how much you sleep, which is generally not a good idea if you have insomnia. Generally, it's not good to monitor how you sleep. But for this particular example, if you're like an athlete or whatnot, you could track how much you sleep and your performance, and just to prove to yourself that there's not this perfect relationship. And then when you realize that, whoa, I ran really fast that day after not sleeping well, then that decreases your sleep, the pressure to sleep and anxiety about it, and you'll sleep better. And here's what I thought about for Brendan, particularly. I thought it might be interesting to share too, was I know Brendan is interested in kind of coaching teams, coaching athletes. And now here's what I was thinking. If, Brendan shared that a lot of athletes have this, like, night before a big event, they're kind of anxious and they have trouble sleep anxiety, just like very many people have. And I thought the same tip that applies to everyone else, I think applies to athletes too, meaning like trying to find that not everything hinges upon sleep. That'll help you sleep better, actually. And here's what I was thinking. If you're a person that want to really make a contribution in this space of kind of performance and sleep, which I know there's a lot going on in that space, if you quote the same studies as everyone else and you say the same thing as everyone else, that sleep is super important, you got everything to sleep, blah, 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 then why should a coach hire you or get you to work with them? What if you took like the CBTI approach and applied it to like the performance sports sleep, and you basically became a little bit of like, a contrarian, if you will. Like, I know you often say that I'm a contrarian, Brendan. What if you became a contrarian? Not because that's cool or whatever, because it's actually because you believe it. And because if you, to a sports coach, if you said, I'm super interested in helping your team, and I believe a big way to help them is to show to them that not everything depends on how you sleep, that coach will be like, whoa, this is new. And I think the only way to really make a big difference is to do something that is new and different. And that's particularly important when you believe that's true. Like classic sports thing here, the Fosbury flop, right? He did it completely differently, yet he really changed it. So just something I was thinking about, Brendan, when I was out running, actually. All right. So that said, Brendan, let's go to this one. There's an email from 2 days ago from Lita, and it goes like this. Hi, Daniel. I've never had a problem with insomnia until I started tapering off the antidepressant medication, paroxetine. I have been tapering for months, and about 2 months ago, as I got to almost the end of my taper, I was struck with insomnia. I usually fall asleep fine, but find I awaken during the night and I can't always get back to sleep. Is this kind of insomnia treated the same way CBT the recommended treatment? Thanks so much. So happy I found your channel. Thank you, Lita. And I'm also very happy you found the channel. Going back to Jerome, seems like Jerome's insomnia was triggered by a lot of stress. Classic, right? Now, when I talked briefly about this, like that's this 3P model, like you may be predisposed, then there's a precipitating event, but it's the reaction to the insomnia that really keeps it going. Well, in that model, we see how whatever the trigger is not actually important. The trigger could be anything. It could be that you are starting a medication, that you're coming off a medication, that you have a health scare, that you move, that it could be literally anything. And again, like it's sometimes it's helpful to know what the trigger is because there's less mystery. But apart from that, it doesn't matter what the trigger is because that's not the problem. It's the reaction to the sleeplessness caused by the trigger that is the problem. So I've definitely heard a story before of somebody tapering off or starting medication and then starting having insomnia. But again, trigger is not important. It's the reaction to it that we want to change. So yes, CBTI is definitely the recommended treatment. I think, and this is not just my opinion, I believe that guidelines now say too that insomnia is, like, for everyone with insomnia, CBTI is really #1 treatment. And by the way, I always try to find positive things here. I've never had a problem with insomnia until I started tapering off. So I guess you've been tapering off a couple of months, which means that I think you've had insomnia for a couple of months, which then, just as I said to Jerome, when somebody has had trouble sleeping for a couple of weeks or months, it is particularly encouraging, actually, because that's not a long time when it comes to insomnia. And typically, it is relatively easy to get back to that. I mean, it may take months, typically weeks, but it can take months. But the good news is that I feel like somebody who's had trouble sleeping for a couple of months and slept well before that, absolutely no reason to believe that you wouldn't go back to sleeping just as good. Absolutely not. So hope that helps, Lita. And let's move to this one. Here, quick question here from Loise from 13 hours ago. Hi, Daniel. I would like to know if there's a difference between SFI and Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. Thank you for your time and reading this answer. Thank you, Luis, for this question. And I think these are both prion diseases. And by the way, I'm definitely not an expert, but I can share that. Yes, I think they're different. I think they're both types of these like prion diseases or neurodegenerative diseases. But I think Creutzfeldt-Jakob doesn't have the is not characterized with that sleeplessness that SFI has. So I think they're different conditions, but kind of related in they're both caused by these like proteins that are not folded the correct way, something like that. So that's my thoughts on that. And I think that was all from the emails, actually. And let's move on to comments here. I know there were a couple. Actually, Lita, who sent us an email, we talked about that email, had another question. And it's just, this is a comment on episode 237. And it just goes like this: how do you stop hyperarousal? Which is a fantastic question, because that's basically it. Like, if you stop hyperarousal, then you will not have any insomnia. Not only that, if you find a way to decrease or stop hyperarousal, you've basically solved so many things. Like you've solved insomnia, you've solved PTSD, you've solved anxiety disorder, and you solved panic attacks and panic disorder, because they're all driven by hyperarousal. Now, so of course, by saying that, I'm, pointing out that, or want to share that, of course, that's not easy. That's a huge thing. But the answer here, more specific answer here, is definitely when it comes to insomnia, everything I talk about here is aimed at reducing hyperarousal. And so when I talk about like education, like knowing that most people sleep a little more than 6 hours, knowing that short sleep or insomnia has not been shown to cause any health consequences, knowing that short sleep or insomnia is just one of the many things that affect how you feel during the day. Knowing that, or spending less time in bed, so to build a strong sleep drive, a need for sleep, and which helps you fall asleep, stay asleep. Everything I talk about here is aimed to decrease hyperarousal. So there's no one thing, it's many, 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 many things, which is basically a combination of education and kind of habit change. That is the key, I think. And then I think this is the last one actually here. And maybe it was, this was actually not so much of a question. It was just a comment from Risha, which was a very nice comment on Insomnia Insight 157. And that concludes it. I felt there was so much to go through today, so I spoke a little bit faster than I usually do. But I hope it was helpful to everyone. And tomorrow, I did, so when was this? Many months ago, somebody wrote me an email. His name was Bobby from Australia, and he said that he'd been told that he was depressed, and that must be why he can't sleep, but he didn't feel depressed. And I had a nice exchange with him. He went on to do better, and then now I believe a good 6 months after initially connected with him, I got an email from him where he shares like what he felt really helped him. So that's going to be a success story for tomorrow. I think it's going to be a really good one. And after that, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I'm not in town. I'm going to be on the East Coast visiting family. So we'll see. I'm still going to try to post some things here, but we'll see. So that said, super big thanks to everyone that is commenting and that is sending me questions. And again, I will be back here tomorrow. Until then, stay out of trouble. Bye-bye.